Okay, so how do we do this whole dummy coding? We have a categorical variable with more than two categories. Two categories is fine for the regression, but when you have a categorical variable with more than two, you really need to do dummy coding in order to run the regression or run correlation, run many of the statistical tests we might want to run. So here, let's focus in on this sex variable, and the actual data set, it just had ones and twos for males and females, but certainly more accurate types of surveys, large-scale surveys now are including intersex. So I've manually put in some 3 here to represent intersex. So the point here is we can't run a regression. It'll let us run. That's the dangerous part. If I try to run a regression and predict mental health from the other 4 variables, it'll go ahead and run that regression for us as if sex wasn't a categorical variable, but it is. And so those results would be meaningless. And it requires us to realize that we have a categorical variable like race or reason for something happening. So what we can do is if we double click on the data, that'll pull the data up. We're going to have to set up the dummy codes in Excel or in Sheets, either wherever your data is linked to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new column. You know what? I'm actually going to create 2 new columns. So this one will be for male, female. You're going to have to create, if you have n categories, then you need n minus 1 dummy coded columns. So if you have, say, 7 categories you want to code, you're going to need 6 columns for dummy code. And then you're going to choose all but one of those to be your actual. So I'm choosing male, female. Notice I'm not putting in a column for intersex here. I could just as easily do intersex and female. Maybe I'm not as worried in the male population in this study. That would be something I could do. Let me go ahead and just leave it like this here, intersex and female. But you do need to choose all but one of your categories here. And we're going to, I'll show you, but we need to, after we code these, make sure that we remove the sex variable entirely. So total, we want 1 fewer column than the number of categories we have. Now, to actually code these, there's several different ways. I'm just going to use an if statement. So if this equals 3, I'm going to give it a 1. Otherwise, I'm going to give it a 0. So these first several should code as 1s, and everything else should be 0. For female, I'm also going to use an if statement. If the value here would be a 2, then I'm going to code this as a 1 for female, otherwise a 0. So here we can see this 1 represents that this particular person is female. This one represents that they're intersex. So what if the person is male? They will also be uniquely identified because they'll be the only ones with a 0 on both categories. So we only have 2 categories, but we're able to divide it into 0s and 1s and tell exactly who. I know that this is intersex. I know that this person is female, and I know that this person is male. It's either 1 0, 0 1, or 1 1. Oh, sorry, 0 0. There is no such thing as 1 1 because these categorical traits would be something you either have or you're only fitting into one category. So you couldn't have more than a single 1 on one of these categories. Now this won't quite work because I need to delete the sex. I could import it like this and just make sure I don't use sex in the regression. Just making sure that that formula went all the way down. It did. One other way that I could do, if I don't want it to, if I delete this right now, these are based on that column, and so it's going to create a problem. So I'm going to undo that. What I need to do is copy it to the clipboard. I did a Control-C, Command-C on a Mac, paste special, values only. Do the same here, Control-C, and then I'm going to paste special. I missed the shortcut key there somehow. Either way works. Notice now this is a number in there, so is this. So if I get rid of this formula, it's not going to affect these two columns. If I save that, okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and close this sheet. And now you see I have two new columns for intersex and female. And if I would run a regression, I could continue that mental health there. Now I could put both of those variables into the regression and run it like this. So interpreting it, down here we have intersex and female. This is comparing intersex to the other two joined together. So intersex versus not intersex. So if someone is intersex here, if they have a value of 1, then they have a predicted 12 fewer days of poor mental health. That's the outcome variable per month, which is certainly not true. All the literature I've seen on intersex would say that there's a lot more stress in general. But these were just completely fake data. So female here would be comparing female versus not female. That not female would include male and intersex. And so by being female as opposed to male or intersex, they're going to have a predicted 1.37 more days of poor mental health per month on average. Notice I do not have a result here that lets me compare male to the other two categories. So male are included, they're controlled for. I've controlled for male in this output, but there's not a specific comparison between males and non-males, a numerical comparison. That's why it's important when you're choosing which values to dummy code, you want to choose the ones that are most important for you to analyze, because there will always be one. It's included into the overall analysis, but you won't be able to piece out exactly that group versus the combined other groups.